I think it's an interesting paradigm that we live in Canada, where I think there's, a lot of really smart people, building really cool tech, but we're kind of overshadowed by our big neighbors from the south. And it's something that's come up on this podcast a couple times for sure, to compare and contrast. And so you mentioned you spent some time in Detroit. I think you said actually you're originally from there, which is interesting. And let's go down that rabbit hole a bit, I guess, maybe from that tech lens, making that switch. It sounds like, you're a producer in the US, and then you said, hey, let's go do this thing in Canada. And you kind of went back to ground zero and had to rebuild things. Was there any kind of point along that rebuilding where like, hey, and then we'll just, plug in this thing. And then you were like, what? That doesn't exist in Canada? Like, how do you guys not have, X or Y or whatever? Were there any moments like that? Were there any, I guess the bigger question being, when you look at the two markets in terms of mortgage tech, are there really big differences? Are they more similar than you think? Or how do you think about the two?
I think about it every day.
Okay.
I love Canada for the fact that it is so ripe for innovation, but it's also the rub.
Yeah.
In that when you come from the outside and you see things being done in a way that you haven't seen them done in 10 years, you think you have all the answers to all the problems. It's not until you get really, really into the weeds of this business that you really start to understand why all these things don't simply exist in the Canadian market.
Oh, that's why, right? Yeah.
That's why. Like it's like, oh my gosh, don't they know that you can just automatically pull payroll and bank data?
Yeah.
You don't need to get pay stubs and bank statements anymore and ask clients to like provide all their T4s. It's regulatory. And even if you pass the regulatory hurdle, well, none of the lenders accept these things as truths, despite them being like more truth, as we know in this industry than, bank statements and things like that, some of which people can create on Word documents if they're willing to go that far and risk their license and career. But it is incredible. You see things like that every single day. And really, it took me some time. I'm still not immune, but it took me some time to stop accepting things at face value for just like, hey, they don't get it. They don't get it, right? Like, I've lived in Canada for 10 years, but we started this business in 2020. So I had been here for 6 years. I was still working for a US company. I was seeing the way that it was done. And it was actually part of that actually drove me to become a part of, the startup founding team at Edison Financial. Was I bought my own house here in Canada. I went through my own mortgage process.
Did you go through a broker?
I went through a broker. I went through a broker. I actually got denied by 2 banks because I wasn't yet a permanent resident or a citizen. And they'd said like, oh, sorry, we don't have any programs for you. So a friend of mine referred me to a broker. They're like, hey, can run down a solution for you. And sure enough, they actually found me a solution. That was what I got. Wise to the value of a great mortgage broker to plug our industry here. Yeah. I went through that process though, and I was just mind blown. I could not believe that they had, sent me a Word document saying, please answer in red to the following like 63 questions. And like seriously, black and white. And then I had to retype in red to all these Word documents, reattach it, and then send it back to the broker, who then like sent it off to the bank. Then I didn't hear anything for several weeks. I'm like, I'm trying to buy a house and this is really, really bad. I'm like, they do know that technology solves for all this, right? And turns out that, we know, but there's really good underlying reasons why these things aren't there. It's honestly a sad truth of our industry, but maybe to put a bow on that, I think it's also the most exciting thing about our industry. Definitely have a long way to go in terms of digital verification. Definitely have a long way to go in terms of document verification. We have a long way to go in terms of getting faster approvals. So I'll give you another little piece of technology that exists in the United States, which does not exist in Canada. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Yeah, I know those.
Have 2 tools. One's called DU. Stayed on this acronym chain here that stands for Desktop Underwriter. And there's another one called LP, which is a Freddie Mac tool called Loan Prospector. And those are basically the Canadian equivalents to how we would think about CMHC, Sagen, Canada Guarantee, in that they say, hey, as long as the loan checks all the following boxes and meets this underwriting criteria, we'll agree to insure that mortgage. So you're effectively underwriting to their criteria such that you can sell that loan off in the secondary market. It's not exactly akin to Canada in that way, but the technology, when you think about it, what they do is they bring the approval forward. So it's just basically a piece of tech that you as the mortgage agent or broker can submit to. And right on the front end, it tells you whether or not that deal is approved or not approved.
Like how
if
quickly?
It's not approved,
how quickly?
What are some of the things that you need to fix in order to get it to an approved status? And what are the documents that are going to be required to get you not just a conditional approval, but the ultimate approval? Still subject to some underwriting in some cases, but it's pulled forward. I'm not wasting any time. I mean, we hear in our industry every day, like BDMs, send me the deal and let me take a look. Let me spend all this time, right? So you spend all this time now as the agent. I'm the underwriter. I'm going to spend all this time as the lender trying to figure out if I can make this thing work. When in reality, a single piece of technology could have just been provided to the mortgage agent and they just submit it. They get all the answers that they need right there. And then we're moving on with that deal and we're moving forward with that. Like, why doesn't that exist in our industry? Well, the answer is a lot of reasons, but
that's a whole nother podcast for the
I could go for days, but that is one of those beautiful things that, you know, it exists in the United States, it exists in Australia, it does not yet exist in Canada, it exists in the UK, again, not in Canada. It's coming. It's coming.
I was going to ask you though, right, is that, you know, we say there's a whole bunch of reasons. There's the regulatory, there's the technology, maybe there's the capital issues, right? Business investment, not enough people investing in Canada. There's the long laundry list.
Yes, and yes.
Yes. Is there one where it's like, if we could just solve this, so much of the other things we could maybe figure out? Is there one thing in your mind, or is it just, it's all those, it's a death by 1,000 cuts where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, the whole list? Like, how do you kind of think of it?
That's a great question. It is death by 1,000 cuts to give you a very straight answer. If it was one thing, somebody entrepreneurial enough would go out and they would solve that one thing. We have an ism here, which is the inches we need are everywhere around us. The reason why we speak, and it's actually originally from Any Given Sunday, but it's like, if it were one thing, we would just go do that. But because it's 1,000 things, it's hard and it's harder, but it's also what makes it beautiful, because if you achieve that thing, it really makes it a lot harder to replicate as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. If it was just yards everywhere, everyone would be chunking those yards, but you win in the trenches, right? You win inch by inch. What was it? The 6 inches in front of you, that was the Al Pacino, right? Or what is it? You probably know better than me. So